Hi, my name is Charles Malky, biologist and plant expert with Ivory Organics and author of Saving the World with the Home Garden. Today we have Tom Spellman of the Dave Wilson Nursery. Dave Wilson Nursery is America's leading distributor of deciduous fruit and nut trees and so much more. And Tom Spellman is the leading educator on the Fruit Tube YouTube. And I'm also going to be including the Dave Wilson Nursery link to their wholesale store in the video description below. Our prior lessons with Tom Spellman include the experimental apple orchard in Southern California, where he proved that most apple trees do not have chill requirements as may be on their labels. Additionally, we also went to the experimental orchard at the Dave Wilson Nursery, sampling fruit and discussing the backyard orchard culture, which is a great way to be growing fruit trees in the backyard orchard. And last, and my personal favorite, is meeting with the late Floyd Zager at the Zager Genetic Orchard, where we sampled nearly 30 of the best tasting fruit on the planet. And Floyd Zager is known as the most prolific stone fruit breeder in the modern era, creating a 1 out of 50,000 fruit. In fact, he plants about 50,000 fruit and only selects about 1 or 2 that he then shares with the public. And these Zager Genetic hybrid non-GMO fruit trees are again available through the Dave Wilson Nursery website. And they're one of the, America's leading way of getting your hands on these amazing and most delicious fruits, which include, again, hybridized plum cods, pluaries, pecotums, so much more. A plum cod being a cross between a plum and an apricot, pluaries, a cross between a plum and a cherry, and then pecotums, peach, apricot, and plum. How amazing is that? Additionally, Dave Wilson Nursery sells approximately 14 million deciduous fruit and nut trees to both backyard orchard growers as well as commercial orchards, in addition to shade trees to help improve the overall health of our planet by 1, producing oxygen, 2, offering shade and natural air conditioning, and 3rd, among many other reasons, is it helps remove carbon out of our atmosphere, which also further contributes towards helping to keep our planet cool. So Tom, if you can also share, what are other Dave Wilson Nursery fruit trees people can find when visiting davewilsonnursery.com?
Well, Charles, we do a real diverse selection of fruiting trees, nut trees, shade trees. We do vines, grapevines, kiwi vines, berry vines, blackberry, raspberry, goji berries, blueberries. We do a whole selection of fruiting varieties that are adaptable throughout the United States and the world. And the reason that we provide so many different varieties is that, we want everybody to be able to have a diversification of fruits so that they can accomplish backyard orchard culture. And in backyard orchard culture, you want, as opposed to a commercial grower who wants a lot of fruit at one time so he can make his living, a backyard grower wants a little bit of fruit all the time. So we're trying to provide as many varieties to fill as many seasons as possible for ripe backyard quality fruit for the general public to grow.
That's great. And Dave Wilson Nursery is a wholesaler. So for backyard growers such as myself, how do we access Dave Wilson Nursery fruit trees?
Well, that's a great question. And yes, we are strictly wholesale. We don't do any retail sales ourselves, but we are selling to retail nurseries and garden centers across the country on material that can be purchased. And we do have on our website, davewilson.com, if you go to the home garden page and access the fruit finder or where to buy our trees, you can look at variety lists of everything we're growing. You can also access retailers and mail order and e-commerce nurseries across the country where you can drive into their parking lot and pick up a tree, or you can have it shipped right to your front door.
That's great. And I'm going to make it accessible to everyone watching that you can simply go in the video description below. You'll see that Dave Wilson Nursery website link, as well as in the comments, again, for your convenience. So you can simply click and it'll take you right there. Additionally, I want to share some background about Tom Spellman, that you also co-authored one of America's leading best-selling gardening books for many decades. I know it was written, way back when, and that you got to be a part of it. And if you can share a little bit about the book and how you participated.
Oh, that's great, Charles. I was real proud to be asked by Ken Anderson of Walter Anderson Nurseries to take a look at the book with them and help on updating some descriptions and some techniques and things that weren't originally listed. Now, one thing that I wanted to make sure we did, and I wouldn't say I co-authored it. I worked with them on some of these techniques, and I wrote the preface, and we just kind of edited the whole thing. But the one thing I wanted to make sure that we did was I wanted to leave all of Martin's information intact. I think that Sanford Martin did an incredible job of writing this book some 70 years ago.
Wow.
And it's been kind of the fruit tree pruning Bible out there for 7 decades. And it's been revised several times over the years, or not necessarily revised, but reprinted. So this was something where we wanted to modernize it a little bit. So we did add a considerable amount of information on citrus and subtropicals. We added a rose pruning section. We revised some of the techniques a little bit to fit into backyard orchard pruning styles, introduced the spellier techniques and hedgerows and multi-plantings and, all of those backyard orchard culture things. So this is the book. It's How to Prune Fruit Trees and Roses by Sanford Martin. And it was just recently revised about 3 years ago. And it's still one of the, for less than a $14 or $15 investment, this is the book that's going to teach you technique in pruning trees and keeping things managed in both a commercial and a backyard orchard style. So I was so pleased to be able to work on that with them. I just love the way it came out, and I have a copy that was given to me for my birthday in probably 1972 or 73, and I still have that original copy. So it was one of the things that I started to cut my teeth on when I first became interested in growing, fruits, nuts, and berries. I think it's a great book.
I'd like to also share now that Ivory Organics was excited to bring, for the first time ever, a Dave Wilson Nursery plant into our specials and sales that we have growing throughout the year. And we're excited to bring Dave Wilson Nursery into our April plant giveaway. And we've discussed the idea of doing blueberries, since I know our audience is very excited about growing blueberries. We talked about raspberries, blackberries, and then you shared the idea of doing grapes, and in particular, the blueberry grapevine, something I've never heard of, but we talked about blueberries at the beginning of our conversation, and the fact that we got blueberry plus grape sounds like a win-win. And if you can share a little bit about why blueberry grapes better than possibly growing blueberries, raspberries, and blackberries that are all available, again, through the Dave Wilson Nursery and its distribution.
Well, Charles, I would never say that growing blueberry grape is better than growing anything else, but it's another slice of the pie. It's another variety that you can include in your collection that will give you another diverse, ripening season of fruit. It's a late summer season ripening variety, so you're getting fruit that's about August, September, October. Blueberry seedless grape has a really interesting history in that a lot of the vines that we have today are hybrids, where somebody has taken 2 different grape strains and they've hand pollinated them, crossed them together, and grown on the progeny, and they're introducing new varieties. Blueberry grape is an old, what we would call a natural found selection. So it was a variety that was growing in the garden of a gentleman, a farmer up in Chico, California, by the name of Paul McLean. It was growing in his grandmother's garden. So nobody really knows where it even came from. It just came up on its own, and they cultured it. And it's an American hybrid selection, like a Concord type grape. So it has a fair amount of disease resistance, bacterial resistance. It's one of those varieties. Most grapes, I would say, fall into a very narrow range of where they're adaptable. Some varieties require early desert heat. Some varieties like coastal growing zones. Some varieties would do better on the East Coast than the West Coast. Well, blueberry grape, being of some sort of an American parentage, it kind of falls into the category where it's adaptable just about everywhere. I've seen it on the East Coast, and I've seen it in some of the northern climates. It's got a great reputation in the southern states, down in Florida and Georgia and Louisiana. It does well in the deserts of the Southwest, Phoenix, Arizona, Yuma, Arizona, Coachella Valley in California. So this is one of those varieties where everybody that I've talked to that has it around the country seems to think that it's a really good adaptable variety for their climate. And like I said, very few grapevines fall into that category. So for that reason alone, I think it's a great variety for you, because you can send it almost anywhere and people are going to be successful with it.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for introducing it to us, and we are excited to share it with those that are interested in bringing a very unique grape variety into their backyard orchard as well. I want to share a testimonial I found from an urban forester CRFG member that actually wrote a little bit in her description, which I'll put here up on the screen as well, from Robin Rivet. I don't know if you've heard of her or know of her, but she wrote that she harvested after a few years in the ground, probably around 200 plus pounds of blueberry grapes off of a single vine. And she additionally writes that we really adore this grape. It tastes and texture so closely resemble a blueberry and almost can forget it really is a grape, except unlike our sparse blueberry bushes, this highly productive fruit actually makes it into our house. It's sweet but rich with a surprising burst of blueberry flavor and bite, and never mushy. It also appears to be disease-free with medium to large fruit by year 3. In addition to the excellent taste, the big leaves are extremely ornamental, turning bright red in winter and lingering on the vine through December in our region. And I believe she's in like the San Diego part of Southern California.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so those are all important attributes when you find a variety that fits into all those geographic zones, and it gives you something other than just fruit. It gives you that fall color, which is a beautiful, bright, dark orange red, and the foliage holds on the vine for an extended period of time. So, I'm always looking for other attributes over and above a plant's fruiting ability to do something for a backyard grower, and this one really, really lends itself well to that. So I've just loved this variety since the first time I was exposed to it. And it was a variety that Paul McLean gave to Ellie Cook Nursery back in the early to mid 2000s, probably around 2008 or 2007. And they were the ones that actually introduced it. And it was one of those varieties when they decided to discontinue their bare root line. It was one of those varieties that we thought, this variety needs to be continued on. It's just not something that we want to see go away. So we were able to negotiate with them and take over the rights to propagate it. And we still pay them a small trademark fee on each vine that we sell, because of the work and effort that they did on introducing it originally.
That's wonderful. So the blueberry grape is one that I haven't really seen among a lot of nurseries where I'm looking at grape varieties. Why is there very little to no literature on blueberry grapes?
Well, what you see in the market is what the commercial growers can grow and harvest early and ship commercially around the country. And those are mostly varieties like, Thompsons and Flames and Rubies and Perlettes and some of the improved strains of those. But this is a unique variety. This is one of those varieties that's very, very diverse in its uses. You can use the fruit fresh. You can make jams and jellies. I've had blueberry grape wine that was absolutely delicious. So it's one of those all-use varieties, and it's not one that you would want to pick commercially. It's not one that you would want to pick early. So you're not going to find it in the grocery store. You'll find it in some specialty produce markets where they can pick it vine ripe and sell it right away, but it's not a variety that would ship. So I wouldn't consider it a commodity like Flames or Thompson's. It's a specialty variety that would require special handling from a marketer's perspective. And that's why it's such an important backyard variety, because, when we're looking at backyard varieties, I'm not looking for commercial attributes. I don't care if you can ship it halfway across the country or cold store it for a month. What I want is flavor. And this is a full flavored, wonderful, delicious, seedless variety. I won't say seedless, I'll say lesser seeded. Very seldom do you find a seed in it. And if you do, it's a very soft seed and not like a hard seed you would find in wine grapes or some of the old line varieties. So, but just has all of those attributes that we want from a backyard grower's perspective.
That's fantastic. In regards to the seeds, from some of the research I've found on the blueberry grape, it's kind of seedless, just as a navel orange, which is a seedless orange, may have like a vestigial or like a shell.
Yes.
Occasionally you might come across that, but not really a full seed in that sense.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And it's one, if you're growing it in isolation where it's not around other grapevine varieties, I don't think you would ever find a seed. If you're growing it around other grapes, 2 or 3 or 4 other varieties in the same collection, you may occasionally find an immature, non-pollinated, seed in there. So,
like the shell of a seed.
Exactly.
With that being the case, and I'm super excited to introduce blueberry grapes into my backyard orchard, can you share with us any planting tips once we get them and are ready to plant them?
Well, yeah. One of the nice things about grapes is their adaptability to a real diversification of soil types. So they'll take a fast draining soil, they'll take a fairly heavy soil, they'll take a slightly acidic pH or a slightly alkaline pH. So they're very adaptable. And that's one of the reasons that they do well, all around the country. So I would say my recommendation on planting and culture would be give it a full sun location. Grapevines typically don't want any shade, or maybe just a little bit of late afternoon shade or early morning shade. I think it would be fine. I'm even though it will take heavy soils, I always like to make sure that I'm preparing my ground and have a decent, fair drainage. I don't want an area where the soil is going to stagnate or become anaerobic and not drain well. That's not a good condition for growing any type of a plant. So decent drainage is important. If your soil is real heavy, never plant it below grade or at grade. Plant it on a slight rise in a raised bed. It works well for container culture. So the first thing you're going to do when you plant this vine is you're going to give it 2 years to 3 years in the ground, where you're going to work on root development and you're going to work on structure. So grapevines need to be supported. You're going to give it some sort of an arbor, or a trellis, or a fence, to grow on, and you're going to grow that structure up on your support system and keep it pruned back, in balance with that support system for the first, like I said, 2 to 3 years. And at that point, you can start to culture some fruiting wood on it. Now, grapevines fall into two or three different categories. There's one that they call cane prune, one that they call spur prune, and then some vines like blueberry that lend themselves fairly well to either type of pruning. So once you have your structural development affixed to your growing trellis or whatever you're using, then you start to culture out canes or spurs. So you're gonna prune it back every year to that trellis face, and you're gonna leave 3 or 4 buds per spur pruning of last year's growth, or you're gonna leave a cane of about 18 to 24 inches of last year's growth. And if you're cane pruning and leaving those canes, that's something where you would need to re-support those. You just don't want those, dragging out and falling out onto the ground. So I like spur pruning better, and I think it's proven to produce just as well with spur pruning than cane pruning. And there's some diagrams on that. There's a couple videos on that on the Dave Wilson website that will explain in a little more detail that technique. There's also great diagrams in the Martin book that explain that technique. So first couple 2 to 3 years, you're developing to structure, and after that, you're either choosing a cane prune style or a spur prune style, or both if you like. You can do both on the same vine, and then you're growing for fruit production after that. So we want to give the plant plenty of time to establish, and then convert over to a productive style of pruning, so that we're getting as much fruit production as possible.
That's fantastic. And the last thing I want to add in regards to some planting tips is, how about for those that are growing in very harsh northern United States climates where maybe the grapevine wouldn't do so well outside? Is container gardening an option for those people, in addition to let's say people also in warmer climates that maybe live in a condominium townhome, just smaller place, and they've got to do container gardening instead of in-ground planting. Is that an option?
Absolutely. I think container gardening with grapes is a great option, mainly because you're pruning that vine back pretty substantially every year anyway. So you can easily keep the structure in balance with the root zone that you've given it to grow in, or the container you've given it to grow in. That's important with any container culture. You don't want a plant structure that's 5 or 6 or 7 times larger than the root zone you've given it to grow in, because then anytime there's a physical stress issue, a heat spike or a windstorm or something that is going to physically stress that plant, you're going to have damage. So by maintaining that balance between root zone and overall structure, no more than about 1.5 to 2 times the overall structure to root zone, then you can always protect it from physical stress. So container culture works out great.
I just wanted to share also, I'm assuming that as the plant is going into dormancy, going into later fall, early winter, that this massive maybe vine that's in container that might be spanning 20 feet, I'm assuming it can grow at least 10, 15, 20 feet per year.
It can.
Once it goes into dormancy, you can cut it back to just a couple of feet, I don't know, about a 70, 80% prune. Bring it indoors,
absolutely,
into your garage, in your home, someplace that's still cool so it doesn't wake up during the winter months, and then restore it back to your outdoor patio if, again, you're in that freezing climate, and bring it back once the temperatures are better, and the plant will resume growth and provide another year of growth and fruit as the plant continues to mature from year to year.
Yeah, and I think in a very cold winter climate, you would be more concerned with freezing of the root zone, the soil ball, than you really would on the vine itself. It is an American type grapevine, so it is very cold hardy. It can be grown right up into New England and on the Canadian border and in areas like that in the ground. But if you were growing it in a container, you would definitely want to offer it a little bit of winter protection to keep it from freezing too solid for too long a period of time.
That's great to know. Something we've done over the years as well is whitewashing, and something we've taught together is that the day you plant a tree is the day you whitewash your tree, and we've done so organically using the Ivory Organics 3-in-1 Plant Guard. And when it comes to grapes, how does whitewashing get involved or needs to be applied or so forth? Like, is there a need for whitewashing when it relates to the planting of grapes and the care of grapes?
Absolutely. I think that first season in the ground is the most important. We're growing a plant under nursery conditions where we're growing these plants virtually 4 to 6 inches apart on nursery beds in small containers. So we're providing a condition under nursery where the plants are being self-shaded. Each row is going to shade the next row, and we're growing them in an environment where they're protected for that first season. So as they go out into the real world in the second season, now you've taken a plant that's been shaded for the first 8 or 10 or 12 months of its life, and you're putting it right out in an open full sun area. So protecting it against sunburn for that first season would be extremely important. So I love the Ivy Organics. I think that's a great product to use on trees and vines alike, and that would work very well for this grapevine. If you're in a really hot area, you might even consider whitewashing it on an annual basis. But now grapes are something that will again provide their own shade as they produce a canopy. So as that canopy develops during the hot part of the growing season, you have full foliage on it, and they're going to shade the stem and the vines and the roots. So if it's in an area like that, it's really not that important. But if it's in an area where you're growing it on a flat trellis, maybe facing south or facing west, I would probably recommend re-whitewashing on an annual basis.
That's great. Thanks, Tom. And then the last thing I want to share in regards to grapevine care is fertilizer. And I know a lot of beginner gardeners think maybe, fertilize every season of the year. But I know that's not the case, and I was hoping you can help clarify and how they can use, for example, an all-purpose Ivory Organic fertilizer such as a super and premium blend to then care for their grapevines.
Well, again, you're feeding for a purpose. So we want to consider the first 2 to 3 years in the ground, structural development and root development. So a fertilizer that's a little bit higher in nitrogen is going to be important to develop that structure. Once we have the structure to the size that we want, and we're now going to switch over to pruning for fruit production, then we're going to go with something that's a little lower in nitrogen. And what I like about your fertilizer blends is they're all inclusive. You know, they have trace elements provided. They have full complements of elements. So they're feeding for a purpose. You know, it's not just like, well, it's all sulfate of ammonia and we're going to throw it on the lawn and the lawn turns green. You're feeding for more than just growth and color. You're feeding for a good solid root development and for the future development of fruiting and flowering wood. So those full complement fertilizers are very, very important for anything where you want to get fruit production back.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to be introducing the Dave Wilson Nursery Blueberry Grapevines into my backyard orchard, as well as sharing it with my friends and family, as well as all of you that are interested in getting your hands on these. I'm going to share additional details towards the end on how you can participate in introducing the Blueberry Grapevines to your property through Ivory Organics. And are there any additional last comments you'd like to share with our viewers?
Well, I'd just like to say I'm really excited to give you the opportunity to send this variety out and work with people on this variety. I think it's a perfect variety to, you know, adapt on a national basis, and it's not like something that, you know, we could only send to a very limited geographic area. So I think people are going to love it. I mean, I personally love the fruit. I love the vine. I like the structure. I like the fall color. It's been almost no disease or bacterial issues from my perspective. So I think it's just a fantastic variety, and I'm real happy that we can introduce it with you.
That's awesome. And again, for those of you, Tom Spellman, wherever he goes and teaches in person, there's usually 100+ people there. If you want to learn more from Tom Spellman, just simply go to FruitTube YouTube. And again, I'm putting that link down below, as well as the DaveWilsonNursery.com website, where you'll see some of the best fruit you can possibly get your hands on in the country. And I highly encourage you guys to check them out and find that local nursery that offers Dave Wilson Nursery fruits to you. Now, to get your hands on one of these blueberry grapevines from the Dave Wilson Nursery, all you've got to do is go to ivorganics.com, and there you can shop directly for the blueberry grapevine. And with the purchase of your blueberry grapevine, it will include a free bag of our premium blend fertilizer, which offers your plants all of the macronutrients your plants need, not just NPK, but also your secondary nutrients, which are right there in the finer print. Contains all the primary nutrients. NPK plus contains all of the secondary nutrients, which is your calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. So by offering your plants the NPK, MGSCA, all 6 macronutrients, you're making sure your plants have all of the necessary nutrients that plants are supposed to have in the soil in abundance in order to have optimal health and performance. And it's coming from, as you may have noticed, our expired lot. The NPK do not expire, but the main difference between the expired lot and our new lot fertilizers is they're now OMRI certified. So both organic ingredients, but we no longer share our labels that we've, created in abundance in years past. And we've got this expired lot of fertilizer that we're now going to include for free. It's about a $15 value with each of your purchases of the blueberry grapevines from ivorganics.com. And you can also get your hands on a blueberry grapevine by getting one of the yellow trio gift boxes. And when you open this, you're not just getting a trio of product, you're actually going to be getting 5 items. The first being the ready-to-use spray bottle, which helps with protection against damaging sunburn, insects, and rodents. This is a way to whitewash the entire plants, leaves and stems included, for protection against, pests and rodents, in addition to summer sunburn. But it helps also as an anti-transparent, which helps with transplant shock. An excellent product when transplanting, up potting, doing anything to your, again, it's all plants. If you take a look very closely at the bottom, I'll try to read backward with you. and it says for use on your roses, fruit, nut trees, ornamental trees, and shrubs. So also your tomatoes, squash, basil, all the plants that you're starting off, again, it's going to help with transplant shock, and it'll continue to grow from there. In regards to spraying any of your edibles, just be sure that you wash it with soap and water before consuming those surfaces that may still have product on it. But again, the goal is ideally with your starter plants, or even for your more established citrus trees, avocados, and so forth, you can whitewash the entire structure. The plant's going to be off to a much better start. Also included in the Trio gift box is the pint-sized can of the Ivory Organic 3-in-1 Plant Guard Protection against damaging summer sunburn, insects, and rodents. And again, you just simply add water. This pint-sized can can make up to 5 gallons or about 20 to 25 spray bottles. So this here can make a lot more of this. Or again, you simply fill up the can, you'll have a pint-sized can of paint, or you can add less water and have a tree paste, for those grafting wounds and so forth, where you want maybe a more thicker consistency. And then it's going to come with a bag of the Super Blend plus azomite fertilizer. And this here is, azomite simply crushed volcanic rock, and it's going to help deliver a lot more micronutrients to the plants. In addition to, it's got a higher NPK, as you can see with the 333 there. Again, offering your plants all 6 macronutrients, and that's something that the Ivory Organics brand products pride themselves on. And as you can see in the upper right corner, right up there, you can see that it's Armory certified, and it's also going to include a free bag from our expired lot. And as you can see, the NPK MGSCA do not expire, but again, this is just from an older batch, and we're no longer selling them, but it's going to come with you. So you'll have just that much more fertilizer to introduce into your garden and hopefully with your other plants. And all of that comes with your purchase of the Yellow Trio gift box while supplies last on the Blueberry Grapevines, which we have a very limited inventory of just a couple hundred, I believe. So I don't know how many days or weeks the sale is going to last, starting April 1st of 2022. If you've enjoyed this educational lesson brought to you by Ivory Organics and Dave Wilson Nursery, be sure to give us that thumbs up, and most importantly, share us with your gardening friends and family, and keep growing with Ivory Organics, and wishing you all happy gardening.